It's Jay. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. Tyler Stone from Behavioral Health joining us here in the studio, and thank you, sir. And also in the second segment, one of the big events in Oklahoma, Native American Affairs, is happening this coming weekend, the opening of the First Americans Museum. Now, we took a tour of that facility back in February 2020 as they were constructing, and talked to staff members, Shoshone Wasserman and Mr. Pepper about the museum, its collections, the kind of services that we'll be sharing and things like that. But first of all, real quick, let me share this. For those of you who are interested in the American Rescue Plan Act benefits for elder citizens 65 and older, they have had a massive response, so don't be too surprised if it's tough to get in. More than 39,000 applications have been received. Now, if you have submitted it and need to make a change or something like that, you'll need to email camphousesupport@mvskokenation.com. And if you want to call, good luck. They have about 200 calls waiting at one time, so don't be too surprised there or disappointed. But first of all, let's get on with it. Mr. Stone, thank you for coming in today. We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Gary. I appreciate it.
Now, as we had mentioned, this is Suicide Prevention Month nationally, and of course we'll be observing that here within the Mvskoke Nation. But first of all, you work for Behavioral Services, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I work for Creek Nation, Mvskoke Nation Behavioral Health Services, and there at Behavioral Health we have we do outpatient therapy for any natives who have a CDIB card. We have 5 different locations in both Omolgi, Sapulpa, Okemah, Eufaula, and Coweta. We also have a lot of different programs within our departments. One of the ones that I focus on is the Suicide and Substance Abuse Prevention grant, where we work with youth and adults. We focus on 10 to 24 years old. But we do a lot of work with adults too, and sort of teaching them about what are some ways that they can look for warning signs that maybe a youth in their life may be feeling suicidal or showing signs of suicide. So that's just some of the work that I do. I do a lot of work with schools as well, getting out to the community, and a lot of different community outreach as well. Just last week we celebrated Suicide Prevention Week. So each day we had a different activity that we did. Last Tuesday we did a social media day, so our social media pages through the tribe were showing a different infographic that showed suicide data rates. It showed crisis lines as well.
Let me ask you, jump in and ask you about the rates. Now, Native America have been suffering with this problem of suicides for decades. Hits hard among our young people and a lot of other elders and people like that. How are we doing here with the problem here within the Mvskoke Nation?
Right. Do you mean in terms of like data, like what the data is here at Mvskoke Nation?
Right, numbers, I think. And of course that translates into families and people. But
Right. So I don't have any specific data right now for just Mvskoke Nation citizens here within the nation. Whenever we look at data that the CDC collects, they don't really break it down by tribe. They break it down more by if they're just tribal or not, if they're Native American. So I don't have anything at the moment that shows our Native American data rates. I do know for Native Americans in the country, it is for the ages of 10 to 34, it's the second leading cause of death for Native Americans. And I know that Native Americans have the highest rate of suicide of any race and ethnic group in the U.S. And it's been like that for quite some time.
Has anyone ever pointed to reasons?
So there's been different kind of theories or speculations as to why. There's this theory about historical trauma. Historical trauma, kind of in its simplest form, is this idea that the trauma that our ancestors experienced has kind of been, that trauma has been embedded into our DNA and kind of passed down from generation to generation. So at the time that we're born, we're kind of born with a little bit of that trauma still embedded into us. So you have increases of anxiety, depression, PTSD, more or less. So that's sort of been some of the theories as to why Native Americans have been hit with higher rates of suicide and things like that.
So yeah, I've heard that before. First time I was thinking, well, how can something that happened so long ago affect us now?
Sure.
But it has this residual echo kind of thing
Sure.
going on, and
Sure.
It's like we're being born with a strike against us almost.
Yeah, kind of like here's the starting line where some people when they're born are kind of starting at, and we're a little bit further back, right? Not to say that, because we start behind the finish line a little bit further, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that, well, we're never gonna rise above this, right? It just means that there's gonna have to be a little bit more of work involved. So one of the things that I'm always trying to do is really increase that community involvement in some way, which is why anytime we do community outreach, I'm always wanting to bring the community out. I've created a lot of different relationships and friendships at my time here at the tribe, just really between helping spread the word, inviting more people to come out and just see some of the things that we do. Last Friday was World Suicide Prevention Day, and we had about 60 people from the tribe and from the community come out just to show their support. A lot of people that come to these sort of events have been impacted by suicide in some way. So not only is it a great place for people to come together and to show their support for suicide prevention, but it's also a place of healing for some people, because so many people at times may feel kind of alone, that maybe what they're experiencing when they have a suicide loss, they may feel like it's kind of an isolating feeling for some people. So I always want to make sure that whenever I'm talking to those who show up to our events, to let them know, you're not alone in this fight.
Well, doesn't something like that show you that a suicide event affects more than just the person?
Absolutely.
The family, the community, the tribe.
Sure, it really does. So the research actually shows that at a minimum, every time a suicide death occurs, at least 25 people are directly affected by it. I've worked here at the tribe for almost 8 years now, and that number has always been exponentially higher. And I think that's because of how tight-knit this community is. So that number has always been much greater than 25 in my experience.
Let me ask you, I guess, a personal question.
Sure.
About the only thing I can do. With that many experiences with this topic, this issue, these tragedies, doesn't that affect you and perhaps the staff who have to deal with this?
Yeah, at times it really does. That's why self-care, working in this field, is so important, because and to kind of answer that personal question with a personal answer, is I lost a really good friend of mine about 3 years ago to suicide. And even working in this field sometimes can bring up some pretty heavy emotions, because I think a lot about my friend Chris, right? But what really I think kind of keeps me going and really helps me in this fight of suicide prevention is how rewarding it can be. Because I've heard stories before that really keep me going, about saying, thank you for training me, because I was able to identify somebody in my life who was suicidal, and I was able to help them and get the help that they need. And I feel like I saved their life, is what they tell me. That's rewarding.
Are you a follower of the new TV series Reservation Dogs?
I am. I'm a couple episodes behind.
Okay, well, this last one has dealing with one of the characters, Laura Dannon, whose a family member committed suicide. He hung himself.
I heard I heard it was a pretty heavy episode this week. I didn't get a chance to watch it. I've been without internet for a week and a half, so I'm a little bit behind. But I heard it was a pretty heavy episode.
Okay, well, be prepared. I mean, they handle these heavy subject so well in that
Right.
episode and the series that I think it's really effective.
Yeah.
Now, picking up on that, and what has your program got together for the rest of the observation of this month now?
Yeah, so we kind of did most of what we do for Suicide Prevention Week. We went ahead and did that last week, actually. Had a really good turnout. We had people come and create chalk images, whether you're writing out, we call it Chalk Out the Stigma. Mm-hmm. It's a way for people to come, and what we're really aiming to do is decrease the stigma of suicide. And when we decrease the stigma, our hope is that it creates a culture in which people feel comfortable reaching out for help when they're feeling that way. Mm-hmm. And that's really what our mission is to do.
So the chalk image, is that like the outline of a body on the ground?
No, it's we use chalk, and we have just kind of a blank canvas on a sidewalk, and we have people write out messages of hope, right? You are loved, you are needed, you're not alone, mm-hmm. things like that. Or people can sometimes get creative and draw pictures of trees or pictures of mountains or whatever they want to. Okay. Really, it's just a way to inspire hope.
Well, I'm glad you avoided that other idea there.
Yeah.
Which is too tragic to deal with.
Right.
Now, in a couple of minutes we have left for you. If someone was interested in either participating or getting more information, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure, yeah. If anyone needs to get a hold of us about questions about therapy, or questions about what are some things that we're doing at the tribe to promote suicide prevention, you can always call our number at 918-758-1930. Again, that number is 918-758-1930. And I'd also like to leave a crisis number, too. If you or somebody you know is feeling suicidal, there is help that is available. That number is 1-800-273-8255. Again, that number is 1-800-273-8255. That's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number.
Well, Tyler Stone, thank you so much. We are going to have you back later this month to get a lot more energy put into this topic and discuss it even more.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again.
But okay, now this month, this weekend is the culmination of a decades-long project to get the First Americans Museum up and running down in Oklahoma City. They're having their grand opening, and materials being distributed regarding that presence. And we actually did an interview with them while the work was in progress. So here we spoke with Shoshana Wasserman and Dean Pepper Hughes about the project. So please check this out.
Shoshana Wasserman. I am the Deputy Director of the First Americans Museum.
All right, we're sitting here in the lobby of a nearly complete project. How would you describe your progress here, first of all?
Well, we're making tremendous progress, especially from somebody who's been here since 2005. As you can look out the windows, you can see that almost all of the building structures are complete. The very last thing that we are getting ready to enclose is that big structure there you see, that big steel structure, which we call the Hall of the People. And you can see they're putting the armature up right now. And so in February, that structure will be covered in glass, and once that happens, all of the exterior building components will all be enclosed. And so from there, we'll be building out all the exhibits inside the museum space, and you're going to see that in just a few minutes.
I think what we're seeing here, the architecture is pretty unique, and obviously, by no pun intended, by design. And what's the direction, or what image, perhaps? What are you trying to achieve with this really innovative architecture?
Well, as you look at the model here, you can see immediately we have the presence of the mound, and that's so important. It's, certainly paying homage to our Mississippian mound cultures. And so it's a huge component of the architecture. We have that earthen architecture, and then we have the man-made architecture, and they connect, just like we believe for thousands of years in that connection. The entire project aligns with the 4 cardinal directions, as our communities have done. since time immemorial. So a lot of, there's so much symbolism, all throughout the museum complex, whether you're looking at architectural spaces, and then there's a lot of storying opportunity to be shared in the architecture. For example, the Hall of the People, when they were designing that space and they were coming up with the support columns, the engineers had an opportunity to reflect back on some of the early interviews that we had done during our tribal consultations, and they remembered, hey, they said that, during times of forced removal, it's estimated that peoples were, moved about 10 miles a day. So why don't we make 10 columns to represent that? And then that, creates a strong connection between the literal structure of the building and the storying, that you have to tell. So
I have a question. What do you call that?
we call that the Hall of the People.
Okay.
Yeah, Hall of the People. So this is our Family Discovery Center, which I told you was envisioned like a giant pop-up book. You can see there in the front, the doors, it looks like a book because you're opening up a book, and when you walk in, it's like that pop-up book. You've literally walked into a pop-up book world, which is going to be really cool. Oh, I forgot my hat. And we have created this whole magical world, which is rooted in, it feels familiar like it's Oklahoma, but it's very magical. So the treatments are certainly magical. But we've taken a lot of the animals that come out of our cultures. We have six primary animal guides. We have Turtle, Grandma Turtle, who meets you at the front door, and she helps you understand how to experience this place, and that all the other animals throughout the pop-up world are going to help you navigate through the space. We have rabbit, we have deer, we have red-tailed hawk, we have coyote, we have spider, and who else am I leaving out? I think that's it. And so those are our 6 primary animal guides. But there's tons and tons of other animals all throughout the world. The big takeaway of this whole experience is that we're all connected. That's what we want people to walk away knowing. And what we've done is we've created zones, we've created areas, and in each of these areas we are uplifting human values, community, respect, stewardship, and resiliency. These 4 values that as human beings, these are important to all of us. And we're looking at it through a Native lens and Native experiences. And so the activities that we've created in each of these zones kind of uplift these values. So really exciting. Something else that was really important to us, you can enter from the ground floor, as you see down there on the bottom level, but you can also enter from the top floor. When you enter through the top floor, come over here and you can kind of peek over and see in here. You enter into Red-tailed Hawk's Nest. When you enter into Red-tailed Hawk's Nest, there's a series of screens at the edge of the nest, and from a hawktail's perspective, you see things in the world that you wouldn't see from any other view, but right up there. And so we have this giant scavenger hunt that takes place. And so some of the clues will light up, and when you, through augmented reality, you'll take those screens and all of a sudden you'll find something, and then it'll come to life, and that's one of the clues for the scavenger hunt. So that'll be really exciting for our teens and tweens. And then, so many of our kids are just sitting behind video screens and they're not moving, and we wanted to make sure, being a seasonal climate, that we had opportunities for some physical activities too, so you literally can climb out of the nest on what we call this treetop trail, and there's all kinds of physical challenges as you go along there. So lots to do in this space. So we're really appreciative of that. It's a very contemporary design, and that's with intention, because we want to show that we are cultures that continue to evolve over time. And so, we've used the best materials, just like one does, when you're setting up your dwelling for your loved ones or your family members. And so we've done that same thing here. And partly because we will be housing, really our treasures from our cultural communities. And so, we have a space that responds, to those cultural items appropriately.
With 39 tribes here in the state of Oklahoma, that's a lot of territory to cover. I mean, I'm presuming you're trying to include a little of each, and no particular tribal dominator. I don't know. You tell me. How did you put all that together into one design, one idea, one project? How did that work?
Well, it began doing tribal consultations. We've done about 4 or 5 different waves of tribal consultations with each of the tribes throughout the state throughout the years, beginning all the way back in 2000. And we chose to take a thematic approach as opposed to assigning a certain number of square feet per tribe. So, for example, we have one gallery space. It's called our Tribal Nations Gallery. It tells the collective story of the 39 tribes that are here in Oklahoma today. At one time, there were tribes that were indigenous to this place, and we certainly want to acknowledge the tribes that have always been here. But most of the tribes that are here today have come from somewhere else, just like us. And, so what's really interesting about this story is that this is a national story. While people might think this is a very regional story, it's really a national story. We have a map that we show where all of our original homelands are. And when you look at that map, the Modocs all the way from, California, the Delaware and Lenape all the way from the East Coast, the Seminoles from the Southeast Coast, our tribes come from all over. So this is our shared American history. You cannot learn history without acknowledging the history of our first Americans, which is why we changed the name of the museum. We wanted to kind of take a bold step forward and help people understand this is American history. It just so happens that we were the first peoples of this continent. And, so that's how we've, approached the story. And what's very different about this museum, which works really well with all of our tribal museums. So, for example, we as the Mvskoke people are building our own museum, and it will tell our story in great depth. We will not be doing that here at First Americans Museum. There's no way we could tell that in-depth story of every single one of the tribes and do it justice. Tribes themselves can do a much better job. But what no one has done to date, and what we are stepping forward to do, is tell that what are the circumstances, the collective circumstances that we can all relate to, or dissimilar, stories that make up our collective reality. So, again.
Yes, that was a very big challenge.
And we had a gentleman who's Pawnee, who's a linguist. He's a linguist specialist, native person, who did all that research, lots and lots of hours devoted to just that one little thing that seems so minor but, becomes so important. So we're really proud. We have an almost completely, all of our curatorial staff is all native. And that's important because these nuances, you don't know these things unless you have those people who have kind of the knowingness to look for these things. So, that's pretty special. We probably won't always get to, have everybody that's all native, but at least out of the giving birth to the exhibitions, we certainly have tried to pay attention to these details. And it also hasn't been easy, I'll be honest with you. The years and years, and I know you guys can relate to this, at the History Center, because you guys have done a tremendous job of this too, but the years of going out and doing those tribal consultations, and then just like us right now, we have a change in government. And so But early on, we made some decisions that we were always going to go to the sovereign nation head first and ask direction from that point. Who are the cultural leaders that you want us to be working with? So now we have to go back to, I'm Mvskoke Creek, and we just have new leadership. So, we have to return to the new leadership, and now we have to make sure that we're, carrying out the right intentions with the tribe times 39. So that's a tremendous effort that people don't really understand. In many ways, we're ambassadors, and we're trying to navigate the space with, all of the different sovereign nations. So it can be really challenging. So I know we probably need to move on the tour, so we'll head this way. Watch your step here. In the Tribal Nations Gallery, we take a thematic approach. We look at this story from a historical perspective, and then we also tell the story from the contemporary perspective as well.
Now, I was wanting to ask you about that name change, for, over 20 years or so it's been American Indian Cultural, blah, blah, blah. And that sounds a bit dry and academic. It's like, you kind of label your specimens, so to speak. But with the change to First Americans, a museum, it's more of a statement. And is that something you would agree with and perhaps the feeling behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a number of reasons why we changed the name. And you're right. First and foremost is that we wanted to take a bold step forward because this museum will tell our stories from our Native perspective, and that is not frequently done. When we look at ourselves, most of us as tribal people, we have our own names for ourselves in our own languages, and oftentimes it translates to something like the people. And so we've always peopled this continent. We know that. We go back for thousands and thousands of years. And we wanted that voice to start being felt throughout the institution. So that's part of what you're seeing in First Americans Museum. The other thing that you're seeing is it wasn't historically accurate, the names before. The American Indian Cultural Center and Museum, the Native American Cultural and Educational Authority. I mean, right there when you were saying it, you stumbled over it, right? It was a mouthful. Nobody could even say the name of it. And so that didn't serve anyone well. And we all know that, there's no one term that can appropriately talk about our Native peoples except for our in our own languages, what we call ourselves. That's the historically accurate thing, but that's not manageable for most people in the broader society. And over time, it's kind of generational. Your grandparents, mine, Indians was a term that was used, and they were fine with that. Then over time, people preferred Native American, then American Indian. A lot of the younger generation today, they prefer indigenous or natives, So no one term is going to do everything for us. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to establish that we were the first peoples of this place, the Americas. And we have histories that predate the United States of America. In fact, as you know, we were one of the last people to have citizenship, and yet we've always been here. So we hope that reflects in the name. And then at the most simplistic level, First Americans Museum, or FAM as we refer to it, is so much easier to grab a hold of. We've got a great acronym. One of the things we love about the acronym is we can say, join our family. FAM, it's inclusive. We want people of many different cultures to come here and find something in this greater American history that they can relate to. And so we want people to feel included and feel like they're part of this family. So it really does a lot of really wonderful things for us, this new name.
This project is a public-private collaboration, and originally this land was city land. In fact, it was an old oil field. There were 51 or 52 oil wells on this site, and then the city gave it to the state to develop the cultural center, and the state helped mitigate the oil field and cap the oil wells and clean the site up. So we've kind of healed the land in a way by putting this cultural center on this site, and we're literally at the crossroads of America. I-35, I-40, I-44, I-235 are right here. ODOT tells us over 100,000 cars drive by us every single day on any given day. It's much more than that in the summertime. So in terms of our location, we're in a great location. Many of you know the history of this place with the state. This was originally a state project under the Department of Tourism, and eventually a lot of factors came into play, but the state really couldn't finish this project like they wanted to, and so a few years ago they handed the project back to the city, and then around that same time the Chickasaws stepped forward and purchased the land around the cultural center, and the proceeds from the purchase of that land have gone into an account with the city to help support the operations of the cultural center. So the Chickasaws helped out a lot in that way. But all the 39 tribes have contributed to this project in one way or the other, and that's why we're here today and we're able to finish the project. But we created a private nonprofit foundation called the American Indian Cultural Center Foundation, which is the nonprofit entity that manages this project now. And I'm the CEO of that foundation. Shoshana's the deputy director. And we have a management agreement with the city of Oklahoma City now to manage this facility to help raise the additional dollars that we need to finish the project. And then we'll be managing this when we open.
The story of this museum stretches back a ways now. You said you came on in 2005, and there was still some movement even that predated then. Started out as a state project, and then got kicked around for a while and mutilated and resurrected, and now we're seeing this thing finish now. Tell me about that challenge there. Just staying alive, keeping your existence there. It had to have been quite a battle there to keep people from abandoning the idea.
Yeah, that's really an interesting tale. And it's not lost on me that the struggle that this museum has had coming to reality is very reflective of the struggle of our peoples in this land. And at any point, any number of us could have given up on this museum project. And we've had great leadership with our board of directors who've retained the vision, never once backing down from it being a world-class, idea to tell a story that had not been told before. And so, I look at our ancestors, and some of them courageously made the journey and were the result of that, being here today. Some of them did not make that journey. And so we have an obligation to stay the course. If they could do that, that has always been my sense of strength with this project, because there have been some really tough times, and there have been a lot of realities that have impacted this project, none of which, people could have originally, envisioned or imagined. But the interesting thing about our peoples is we've always been flexible. We were removed from our homelands, and we were moved to a new land. And yet we learned to adapt, and we learned, how to understand the flora and fauna in this environment and thrive. And so I think that adaptive spirit, it lives at the heart of this project. And I've always believed, as you mentioned, I came on this project in 2005. I started October 1st, 2005, and the very first project I had was to help orchestrate the ground blessing ceremony that took place November 1st, 2005. And I believe at that time we invited all of the cultural leaders from every single tribe to come out here to the site and in their own way offer gratitude, blessings in their own tribally specific way. These things were private. We had our own Mvskoke people at the helm of that. Felix Gouge and Sam Proctor and many others. I could go on. They lit our first fire here that day during ground blessing. And that fire consisted of some of the embers from some of our tribal towns back in our homelands. And when we light that fire again on the opening day in 2021, it will be the culmination of our embers from homeland, the fire we lit in 2005, and the fire we'll light in 2021. That's really powerful. And I believe at that time of ground blessing, it wasn't just a motion that we were going through. We weren't just making up a ceremony, to begin construction. But I really believe we called our ancestors to come forward and help protect this project. And at the most dire moments in this project's history, I've always believed that the only reason that it survived and thrived is because of some of those ancestors seeing that way for us. And so it's very spiritual, for me personally, to have been on this journey. And I'm so excited now, about opening day. This is the good part. This is the really exciting part. But it's still not without challenges. We have very, very limited budget. We're understaffed. We're trying to do so much with so little. But we can do it, and we will do it. And so I'm very proud of that fact. We have great leadership now with James Pepper Henry as our director. James Pepper Henry, while he's a Kaw citizen, he's also Mvskoke Creek. He's part of the Childers family. And he came up through the ranks of the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. He went on to the Anchorage Museum in Alaska. I know you visited him up there. He was there for 6 years. He was at the Heard Museum, at the Gilcrease Museum. So it was really, when he stepped onto this project, it was really important to have that kind of experience and leadership to see us to the opening day. But there have been many others before him, and each person had something to contribute in a very special way that was right at that particular moment for the project. And so we're very grateful to all the hands, that have touched this project. And I'm very proud of our Mvskoke people because on several occasions at the ground blessing, we were contributors. We've contributed financially, a number of other times. We've contributed with our stories, with our, through tribal consultation. I'm very proud that the Mvskoke Creek Nation has always been very responsive with this project. And so, that makes me proud to work here and know that we've done our part.
That part includes, outlasting the naysayers. People said, pull all the money out, it's a waste of money, give the land back to somebody else and let them do something. It's survived beyond that. And it's, I think, evolved. The project has evolved over the years, kind of leaping over different technologies. I understand that you used to have some space set aside for telephone booths, and I pulled it out because you didn't need them because everyone's got a cell phone now. So that kind of represents an interesting, shall we say, stubbornness, determination perhaps. What was it like trying to bridge that kind of thing? What kind of energy did it pull out of you? I mean, it had to be hard.
Anything that you do well is hard. But everything is always possible, too, And if you have the right kind of spirit, if you have the right kind of hope, if you have the right kind, if you're Enoch Kelly Haney was one of the people that sat on the appropriations. He was in the legislature at the time. And he was part of the reason this project got its original funding. And he's always said, and he's been a part on the NACEA board for many years, and he's always said, you have to dream big, you know. You have to dream big, and you have to go after what you think is impossible. And he instilled that in me. And I appreciate that from him and, you know, Governor Anatubby, who sits at the chair of our NACEA board. He has been steadfast. Other leaders like Chief Sparkman, you know, Dr. Henrietta Mann. We've had a lot of tribal people involved with this project in a variety of different ways. And that's helped nurture the spirit of this place, you know, over time. So I'm very grateful to a lot of those mentors that stayed the course.
In the process of staying that course, one of the major challenges was funding. The state allocated X amount way back when, and then you've had to use that for development here. And then for perhaps a period, it looked like it was in danger of collapsing because it takes money to do this kind of. But then a couple of sources came forward, some private foundation money, I understand. The Chickasaw Nation had played an important part. You've worked with the city of Oklahoma City and other entities that have helped you survive now. How would you describe that funding situation now? I understand you probably still have some challenges, but do you feel like you're on stable ground now, or not walking uphill as much, perhaps? How would you describe it?
Certainly not walking uphill as much, that's for sure. And you're right, you just described, you know, originally this was always perceived to be a state project, you know, in the early years. And but it was always going to receive federal funds, state dollars, private sector money, and it does. But you know, to give you one example, at the onset, we were authorized $33 million from the federal level. Well, so many of the realities changed at the federal level: wars, Katrina, 9/11. I mean, there have just been so many different things that occurred that could never have been anticipated, and that put a lot heavier of a burden on the state of Oklahoma, So that became more challenging for them. And then you're right, this was originally land owned by the city of Oklahoma City. It was deeded to the state of Oklahoma with the sole purpose of creating a museum and cultural center, and it could never be used for any other use other than that. And then when the realities at the state level changed and you know, it was realized that it wasn't going to be able to be fulfilled in the way it had originally been imagined, there was this opportunity for it to revert back to the city of Oklahoma City. Now, James Pepper Henry and I and all of the staff on the museum, we work for the foundation that has a management agreement with the city of Oklahoma City. And so that's kind of the structure of it. But I'll tell you this, we have had support, 100% support from every single one of our tribes. So every tribal member out there should feel proud and should feel excited. This is their museum. We've have had 100% participation. Our tribes aren't created equally. We have different capacities. And so obviously some tribes have been able to give at higher levels than others. But it doesn't matter what level. The fact, even just the giving of all of our stories and our cultural materials, you can't put a value on that. Without the tribe's participation, this story could not be told. And so I hope personally that all tribal members can feel very proud of that. And we still have some fundraising to do to complete the facility, but we're very, very close. And, as you sit here in this, space right now, you can see the construction that's taking place outside. It's a lot easier to raise money in that environment than when the museum was at a standstill. So we're very hopeful. We know we're going to get there. We're already planning the opening day activities. So that shows you the optimism and the just the excitement that we have in bringing this to fruition.
What kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? How would you perceive this museum as standing up among the, quote, attractions, unquote, in the state of Oklahoma? Where would it fit?
Well, I mean, I think it's one of many wonderful attractions that we have here in the state of Oklahoma. You know, we're right in the crossroads of America. I mean, you can look out here and see I-35, I-40, 244. I mean, all of the highways intersect right here at our property. And so you just couldn't ask for a better location. But I'll be honest with you, when this project began, it began as an economic development project. The State Department of Tourism, the reason they had an interest in this project early on is, you know, in the 80s with the economic downturn, they were looking for a way to sustain Oklahoma's economy. And they knew that with tourism being the third largest industry in Oklahoma, that was something they should focus on. They did a Price Waterhouse study, and in that study it said what we all know. You have to promote what people know you for. Well, what do people know Oklahoma for? I mean, the name of our state, Oklahoma, two Choctaw words, you know, loosely translated to red people. What are we known for? American Indian or first American, you know, cultures. We're also known for Western heritage. We're also known for Route 66. So, I mean, I think we have, if you're looking at it from just a tourism perspective, you know, we fit beautifully in, we complete the Oklahoma promise, if you will, for folks that are coming to this country who have never been to this country. They're going to continue to go to the East Coast, the West Coast. But the folks who have already been to the East and West Coast, they're looking for that niche American experience. What is so unique about this country? We can deliver all three things here in Oklahoma. So I think the opportunity, you know, to tell our story in an authentic way from Native perspectives is really powerful. You know, I mentioned to you we have that Tribal Nations Gallery, which tells the collective story of the 39 tribes, and we do it in a media-rich and interactive way. We're also, we've signed a long-term loan agreement with the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, and we are bringing, excuse me, approximately 140 cultural materials that were all collected here in Oklahoma at the turn of the century. These cultural materials, they went on a journey. They went first, some of these, to Penn State, and then on into New York, and now they reside in Suitland, Maryland, at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. Well, these materials were created by our peoples here. And in many cases, we know the descendants today of the original creators. So when these cultural materials come back to Oklahoma on this long-term loan, this is going to be the most amazing story that gets told. It's a homecoming for these cultural materials. They're coming home to the tribe of origin. And can you imagine the excitement our people are going to feel when they see these cultural materials here again? Some of our peoples will never get to Washington, D.C. to see these materials. And so, you know, it's wonderful that we're in such close proximity to the tribes, that the tribes will be able to be reunited with these cultural materials. So that's another one of our galleries. And then we have the Family Discovery Center, which is an intergenerational discovery center, which is envisioned like a giant pop-up book. You walk through the doors, and it feels like you walked out into this pop-up world. And we have taken some of the animals that, you know, we know as our clan animals. And those clan animals serve as your guides in this space, and we uplift some different values like community, respect, stewardship, and resiliency. But we do it through fun activities and games. But these animal guides help you navigate through the space. And so this is a space that's good for grandma, it's good for the teen tween, and it's good for the little tiny guys. So it's going to be a really fun environment. And I haven't even touched on the restaurant, the cafe, the museum store, the programming. You know, as I mentioned, we're aligned with the cardinal directions, so we'll have special seasonal programming during the times of solstice and equinox. During the time of the winter solstice, the sun sets right through our West Passage tunnel, and from that very same spot at summer solstice, the sun sets right on the top of the promontory mound. So this is going to be a really special place for all peoples.
We're about done with you, so we can save what's left of your voice there. You mentioned the Smithsonian a couple of times, and I've heard some reference to this project being a Smithsonian of the Middle America, the West, whatever you want to call it. And one of the criticisms was maybe you were shooting too high, it cost too much to become a Smithsonian. I had done a project some years ago on native remains, bones. And one of the things I had to do was go to the Smithsonian and see what they had in the collection and talk to them frankly about, what they got, how do they feel about it, what are they doing with it. And I walked into this big gallery with the assistants there, and it just had huge stacks of drawers. I mean, it's probably that would have reached almost to the ceiling here of different places and peoples and things, but all of these remains. I got a chill. I mean, personally being a native person, I thought, oh my God, these are our ancestors here, and had got them stuck in boxes, and part of the hair on the back of my neck stood up, of course, but I thought, well, you're a reporter now. Let's maintain your balance there. And the workers there referred to this material as of course, material or specimens. I'm thinking, no, that's wrong. I mean, these are humans. These are people. So the Smithsonian, I thought from that point on, has kind of a good and a bad reputation as far as our people are concerned. So what steps maybe is this museum taking to avoid that kind of thing?
Well, that's probably a subject for another whole conversation. But I will tell you, we won't have any human remains as a part of this exhibition or archaeological materials. And we even, with the collection that we're bringing from NMAI, we take a peek back into collection practices, good, bad, and the ugly. And so we really address that head on. And then we're looking at these cultural materials, and you notice I'm saying cultural materials. I'm not saying artifacts or objects, because these are our relatives, these cultural materials, and they've gone on a journey. And yes, they were collected, and yes, we are a museum, and so we're part of this Western museum experience. But we can interpret things differently. We can interpret things from a native perspective, and we can bring knowledge to the collection, which is what the Smithsonian is so excited about, is that through our tribe's close proximity to us, they can help them understand their collection even better. We don't want any of the tribes to be underrepresented, so we will commission a few items, or in that particular instance, we reached out to Fafako, and that we have a hymnal that is a very early hymnal, and so that will be one of the three pieces that represents Fafako. So in that collection, there'll be mostly Smithsonian materials, but there will also be a few commissioned pieces or a few pieces that come directly, from community that we know is representative of those tribes.
Now, I was eavesdropping, so I heard your interview, but I found it very interesting and informative that you're not calling things artifacts, that you're talking about cultural materials and cultural items rather than the way they're usually exhibited and the way we usually write about them. They're artifacts in the exhibits.
Now, throughout the life of this project, there have been a lot of naysayers saying this is a waste of money, waste of land, there's enough around here to honor Indians and that sort of thing. Extremely negative to the point where they wanted to see this thing leveled off. Have those voices been silent now for good reason? Do you still hear from that sort of thing?
I think there's still a little bit of chatter out there, but in terms of wasted land, the land was wasted literally before we took over. And as I said, we helped heal the land. We helped clean up this space. It was basically almost a Superfund with all the oil wells that were out here. And so we've cleaned up the land and healed the land in that regard. And so it's in much better shape now because of this project. Also, yes, I know that there have been taxpayer dollars that have gone into this project, but the real benefit of having this is that we're going to be attracting people from all over the United States and all over the world coming to Oklahoma, coming to Oklahoma City, and a lot of the businesses around us will benefit from that. And the real value is the increase in tax revenue, bed tax and sales tax revenues by having this here, by attracting people from all over the world. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but the annual economic impact is to the local economy and to the Oklahoma economy by having this here is over $130 million a year from what I remember, and that will almost more than pay for itself in 1 year just by having that much business coming through. That doesn't mean we're going to sell $130 million worth of tickets to the museum. What it means is people are going to come here, they're going to stay in hotels, they're going to eat in the restaurants, they're going to shop at our various places around our city and around our state. And so that's going to generate that extra sales tax revenue much needed for the state of Oklahoma.
Okay, finally, and we'll wrap this up, is there a final word or thought that you might want to leave with our listeners about the museum? First of all, what's the opening date now?
May of 2021 is when we're going to open, and so we're only about a year and a half away from opening. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're on track, on target for that opening in May. Final thoughts. I'm a member of the Kaw Nation of Oklahoma. I'm also Mvskoke Creek, and all of my staff, or the majority of my staff, are members of tribes in Oklahoma, and this is very personal to all of us. This is our story. We're telling the stories of our people. I wish my grandparents were still with us to experience this as well, because I know they would be very proud that we're finally telling the stories of the tribes here in Oklahoma. So it's been a long time coming. People have been thinking about a place like this for several generations, and it's time that not just our state but our country told this story, the stories of how the tribes ended up here in Oklahoma and the contributions that we've made to not only Oklahoma but to the country and to the world. So we're able to tell that story now, and it'll be very inspiring and very educational for anybody that comes to visit us. And I think people will walk away and be amazed about what they didn't know about our 39 tribes here in Oklahoma.
That was the staff of the First Americans Museum opening this weekend, the 18th at 10 a.m., intersection of all the major highways there as you go into Oklahoma City. So we hope that you'll take time to check it out and be part of that. So we want to say thank you for listening to us here on Mvskoke Radio. Mado Mabo Hedgitscut, and we'll see you probably with a substitute next week. Mado. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates.
Minot.